before the elections in 2019, and it was a kind of maybe writerly hubris. Hubris for the students here is a certain kind of maybe foolish pride. I thought as a writer and as a citizen, this was my manifesto, even if it was fiction, before the elections. But strangely enough, it is just as relevant now, if not more relevant, because what the book was trying to do, as I sat in this room and wrote it, is that on the one hand, that we have old divisions, such as caste, which persist. And we have new ways of oppressing people, such as the stifling of dissent. So this I was writing about the last few years. Of course, caste is a very, very old division. So, but talking about the new manifestations of caste discrimination. But I find now, this year, you know, writers don't feel happy if our books remain relevant. We want it to be over. We want it to become history. But it is shockingly relevant today. So the whether it is who is more susceptible to COVID, it is always the disadvantaged. It is always the marginalized. It is always the oppressed. So there is definitely a link between caste and who's suffering. There's a link between class and who's suffering, the migrant workers. Again, there's a link with caste. There's a link with community. So, and with, instead of paying attention to people's health, instead of paying attention to people's livelihood, we actually are in a situation where more and more people are being picked up for questioning. They're being interrogated. They're being, even elderly and eminent citizens like Anantel Tumbre are being imprisoned. So this is a clear stifling of dissent. So in a way, the novel, I'm sad to say, is not just something that was relevant last year, but it is as if it continues to write our collective autobiography this year. And so, you know, when I say it is my writerly manifesto, what I'm saying is it has to become, for it to have meaning, it has to become the reader's manifesto. So we actually say it doesn't matter what caste we belong to. It doesn't matter what community we belong to. How do we make all of ourselves citizens who are in solidarity with other people, even though we may not speak that same language or eat the same food or pray like them or not pray at all, you know, but how do we achieve a collective life in solidarity and actually enrich ourselves through this kind of conversation? You know, because as we know from the unit we live in, from the family, life would be very boring if everybody was similar. Life would be very boring if everybody agreed on everything, you know, but life would be so much better if we didn't have an imbalance of power, if we didn't have fear, if we didn't have violence. So that's where the book is coming from. But let me give you a taste, because writers should never be talking about their books. They should just present the books. And really, you should be reading them. But I just want to give you an idea of, I'm not going to read about the dissent part, because I think all of you have more than enough examples in public space. But with the caste narrative, there are actually three narratives in this book. One is somewhere around the 12th century. And we think of a very rich history we have of caste movements, of equality for women movements, and the Bhakti movements were very, very interesting because they didn't reject, they were not atheist, But they said, hey, if we want to pray, we will do it without the priest and the church. We will do it without the mullah and the mosque. We will do it directly. And in different parts of the world, we've always had people asserting not just their right as citizens, but even their right to conduct a spiritual life without somebody telling them how to go about it. And I think these things are important for us readers and writers to see in as a whole and learn from the past. So the first narrative has a boy whose father is a cattle skinner and he has just died. And this boy is just wondering what to do. And then he meets two men who say, don't you know, we're all brothers and we have an experiment, a community called Anandagrama, where we have all kinds of castes and professions, whether they're rat catchers or cattle skinners, all of us living together, we're experimenting. So his name is Chikka. Let me read a little bit from there. Chikka is in a boat crossing a river. It's the first time he has seen a river. It's the first time he's crossing a river. The first time he's in a snug boat made for four, going he doesn't know where with three strangers. Strangers who call him brother. So many firsts on a single day. Chikka turns back just once. Where is the land he has left so suddenly, so easily? That bank, the village, the jungly no man's land, dividing high and low, and beyond the pond, the untouchable settlement, his father's hut, his father. The horizon has swallowed it all up. Peddi the ferryman is deferential to elder brother, friendly with Putana, and indulgent to Chikka. Peddi shows off what the boat and he can do together. He slows down, comes to a stop, and the boat breathes on its own, moving where the river takes it. Suddenly, Peddi pulls back, then pushes and pulls like a demon, so the oars beat the water out of the way. The boat runs faster than the river. Peddi looks at Chikka as if to say, see, Peddi could be his grandfather, giving him a treat. This is one more miracle in a day of miracles. It's late in the afternoon. The sun is well past mid-sky. It's slipping down the side of the sky. It spent the best or the worst of its strength. The sun is willing to be benign now. A breeze stirs. It turns cool, so cool. There's goose flesh on the river's skin. The water ripples. There's goose flesh on Chikka's arm too. That thick skin made for humiliation or flogging or hopelessness is losing hold of him. It's peeling off him, falling to the floor of the boat like blood-streaked hide. This new Chikka, the one who has just been born, hears a humming. It's Peddi. Putana and elder brother have heard him too. Elder brother leans across, taps Peddi on the shoulder. Sing, brother. Sing out loud. The river is waiting for you. This is all Peddi needs. He throws back his shoulders and sings as vigorously as he rows. His voice is strong, used to straddling the waves. My body is my boat, the boat my prayer. How it sings, this prayer, how it sings. Mid-river or safe on shore, body and boat, song and prayer, one and the same. Peddi sings the lines again. This time Putana joins him. Their voices blend, so they become one. They're showing Chikka what it is to have body, boat, song, and prayer become one and the same. So there is this wonderful experiment, as they have been so many times in our history, to try and build a society that insists on equality, where men and women are the same, where people are used to be Brahmins, used to be Dalit. But of course, like many movements, it fails. So what I've created in the book, of course, is a fictitious movement, but it's based on real life history. But what I want to say is there are two things. One is to look at, okay, all this 1,000 years later, what has changed and what has not changed. That is one thing to look at. The other thing to look at is always the narrative of resistance, so we don't lose heart, which is, what is the value of failed action? I mean, before we won our independence, there were many actions against the colonial powers that failed, but they all built a certain momentum. They all gave a certain courage and strength, so that finally in 47, those who won the freedom struggle were standing on the shoulders of those who had been fighting, whether they were known or unknown, whether they're in our history books or not. So that is what those two strands I want you to keep in mind before we go to the present times. So as I said, there's one narrative of this roughly 9th to 12th century boy. Then there is very much a contemporary narrative of 3 Dalit students who want to get into medicine after school, and what is their experience. And in between, like a bridge, is a teacher of literature, like many of you, in a small town, who discovers that the poet who you just heard, Chikka, who becomes a dhobi but is also a poet, when he says that he was actually the son of a cattle skinner, then the Hindu right wing take offense, because they say, how dare you, make one of our saint poets a Dalit. So it's all right to have a Hindu saint poet, but you don't want to admit that he is Dalit. So finally, like so many of our terrible experiences in the last few years, M.M. Kalburgi was definitely, this is not about Kalburgi, but he was an inspiration. Again, the Dalit students, it's not about Rohit Vemula, but he was an inspiration, because I was really writing about the times we're living in. So coming to our times, one of the 3 students, Satya, who's the only one of the 3 who manages to get into a private medical college as a quota student, quote unquote. And what he suffers because of his lack of knowledge of English, because of his being isolated for his caste and so on, and being picked on by a particular professor. Satya, his name is Satya. Satya looks at the closed door with the forbidding nameplate. Dr. Professor Sharma. Satya takes a deep breath, knocks on the door, then pushes it in. He stands near the chair, waiting to be asked to sit down. Across the table, Dr. Sharma ignores him for several minutes. He's rereading Satya's latest test papers. It's a pile of them, so it can't be just the anatomy test. How did he get hold of all his subject papers? Satya shifts from foot to foot. Then it strikes him. It must be Murthy, the man in the office who has access to everything from attendance sheets to test papers. Dr. Sharma finally looks up. His face is blank, as if he has not summoned Satya there. Yes? Sir, Professor, you asked me to meet you. Satya hates the soft, stammering voice saying this, a voice he does not recognize as his own. Dr. Sharma has lost his blank look. His face fills with mock puzzlement. Oh yes, I remember now. There's something I don't understand and I need you to explain it to me. Professor, what should I explain, sir? Your test marks in the other subjects. I know how badly you're doing in anatomy. Sharma is having a hard time keeping up the puzzled look. There's a smirk peeping through. Yes, Professor, I want to talk to you about the latest test paper. I compared it with the answers in the text. Sharma ignores this. Instead, he says thoughtfully, how did your marks improve so suddenly in the other subjects? No one has noticed your copying? Satya's flabbergasted. Before he can say anything, Dr. Sharma leans forward, asks in a perfectly reasonable tone, all this trouble for what? Suppose you get your MBBS. Just in case you do manage to get your degree from here, how many people would agree to be treated by you? His face hardens. His eyes bore holes in Satya's face. Sharma has stopped playing. He holds up his right hand, makes a fist of it. It's such a tight fist that whatever empty space remains inside must be airless. See this fist? Take a good look at it, because that's where your future is. Satya rushes to the dissection hall, worrying that he's late, worrying that he will not recall what he watched and heard and did in the last session, worrying about the complete silence that has greeted his letter of complaint, worrying about his scholarship, worrying about money. In the dissection hall, everyone's already around the 4 cadavers, one for each batch of 25 students. As always, the pungent smell of formalin hangs in the air. It seeps into every pore of his skin. Satya blinks to clear his eyes. He can't possibly remain at the back with the students who just watch. He pushes his way forward, ignoring the usual barbed remarks. In his room at night, the cadaver's face comes back to him. How peaceful it looked, embalmed in sleep. On his own face, and he doesn't need a mirror to look at it, he can see 1,000 miseries. No, he can see only one, with a small single-syllable name, but as big as a monster, many-headed like some mythical beast, too many heads to be killed by Satya in just this one life. The creature is taking up every inch of space in his life, gobbling up all his air. Yes, Satya has his armor, his weapons, his yearning, his hard work, his mother's love, his brother Prasad, Asha, Ravi, Chikkaya's words like distant memories, and his own words. But they're still so simple and raw. How much can they do? He picks up the blue notebook, opens it to a new page, and writes, "This is a cobbler's child. Don't sit next to him. This is a washerman's child. Don't speak to him. This child's mother lifts buckets of shit. Run away from him. My tears for these children have dried up. Must my voice too grow silent?" There's several pages in the notebook still, inviting him to fill them up. But they too will have to learn that not all dreams are allowed to live. So this is, I always end with a reading for the way ahead. So either I'm going to be democratic, though I can only see about 6 of you on the screen, and ask whether you would like to ask questions now, and I end with that short reading at the end of the book, or would you like me to read it now and then have questions? Any opinions? Read now, says Subhash Kumar. So I'm going to be obedient and listen to Subhash. Thank you. So, you know, I have actually told you how, while there is a difference between Chikka 900 to 1,000 years back and Satya, who has managed to get into medical school. But the point is that we now have that Satya lives in, I think there's somebody who needs to mute. Could you mute your microphone, please? Could you mute your microphone, please? Okay. So the difference, of course, is not just the fact that Satya is able to get to college, but the difference is we live in a country with a constitution which is entirely and fundamentally based on equality. Whether it is gender, whether it is religion, whether it is caste, whether it is tribe. So I think that is something we have to keep in mind, that the promises of the Constitution have been very, not just partially fulfilled, but very, very inadequately and poorly fulfilled. And now, of course, in the last couple of years, there are new attacks on the Constitution, such as it is, even before we could fulfill the initial promises. But I also want to say that the narrative is never one of despair. It is a terrible situation. It is somewhat like the real life virus confronting us now. As Professor Ibrahim said, that it is a bleak outlook. It would be foolish to pretend it's not, you know? So the physical virus is there, the health system is collapsing. Similarly, the virus in our education system is there. There's institutional discrimination. There is police violence. There is a government that does not believe in complete equality for every citizen, that every citizen in this country must have equality, not just to pray and to eat and live as you want, but in terms of livelihood, opportunity, jobs. So I think it's very, very important that we tell each other, we give each other the strength of saying, but we can still converse, we can still talk. So what do we do with this conversation? What do we do with our reading and writing skills? How do we build this wonderful thing called solidarity? So in my novel, that wonderful professor who supports the students, who insists on researching truthfully, doing his job, he dissents by doing his work as a teacher, as a researcher, as a writer. That is the meaning of dissent. You just do your work properly, honestly. And he's killed for that by a right-wing assassin. The young Satya is defeated by the system. It really is a question of institutional murder, as we have seen in real life, and he commits suicide. But the survivors are there. And as long as they fight in the names of those who have gone before us, who fought before us, that all is not lost. And I just want to read from the end of the book. The people ahead are moving. The rally has begun. The banners have been stretched out. The placards go up, high enough to be seen and read. And the slogans, how many there are, how they mingle words and languages. Then a long one-voiced call fills the air. The reply is many-voiced. It's like a song Satya's mother and her friends may have once sung in the fields. The rally is moving slowly, but it's moving. People are crying themselves hoarse. They fill up the road. The march has so many groups with their own banners. They look like the segments of a very long insect with 100 legs. From where Asha walks, she can hear one wave shouting, Lal Salam. That wave meets another one that roars, Jai Bhim. Asha walks between the waves as if her thin, dark body, her voice, can make a bridge. Every time she responds to a slogan, Asha feels her chest tighten. She means what she says. She means it so much that she has to shout it out. The people's voice, Senthil called it. Senthil's voice, Ravi's drum that beats like a powerful heart. The voice Asha hears coming out of her mouth. Together, they make up a song with many verses, with or without rhyme. And the refrain must boom its way into the air, into Ravi's airless home and Satya's mother's lost field and Asha's father's government office. It must roll like a tsunami, find its way into the classroom and court and parliament and Satya's grave. The refrain is the one part of the song that must be sung together. It's going to be hard work. This song that demands words and voices, knowing and speaking. But the sun shines so hard, it could be the most powerful slogan shouter in the world. The road ahead of them is as lustrous as water. The sweat pours down Asha's back. Her kurta is tucked to her skin. Ravi's face is wet, but he's hammering his drum, stopping only to wipe the sweat off his hands. Then an unexpected breeze arrives, turns into wind. It amplifies the people's slogans. The wind blows, teaching everything, every scrap of junk, every person there, what it is to move, to refuse to stay in the same old tight-fitting place. The slogans get louder and the drums beat harder. In this blur of faces, words, and voices, Asha can almost believe that this crowd is not alone. There are other crowds in places across the country. There's strong currents flowing down roads and fields, through villages and towns and cities. The crowd mills around Ravi and Asha. Ravi's drum has finally gone silent. She takes Ravi's hand. The red and blue flags, the words, the voices, the people. Is it only today? Or has this river of living bodies been flowing for 1,000 years? The river rises. It fills Asha with anger and grief, but also a strange joy. She can hear Satya tell her, or maybe it's she who's telling Satya and Ravi, even Professor Krishna and Chakaya, I have become the tide. I'm going to stop there for a while and take some questions so that I hear other, maybe Professor Ibrahim could tell me some of the questions.
Yes, ma'am, it was really nice listening to, and such a great novel it is. Honestly speaking, till today I haven't read this novel, but yes, this is going to be a must read for all of us participants here. It is really very mesmerizing. I request our colleague Saket to take up the questions from the participants. I request that there are certain professors and faculty members here in this meeting. So I request them to begin the questions first. We will take up the questions of your students later on. Saket, please continue the session.
Yes, sir. Thank you, ma'am. We have different faculty members from different departments and different universities as well. I request if anyone wants to interact or ask anything, then you can please unmute and ask it.
Saket?
Yes, sir.
Saket?
Yes, sir. We have Dr. Manoj.
Manoj, sir, if you can unmute
Manoj, sir, if you can unmute and ask
your remark as well as your question yourself. Manoj, sir, please. We have Dr. Manoj Kumar Pathak, ma'am. He is in Arka Jain University, and he's a very young colleague of ours in that university.
Good morning.
Manoj, sir, if you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, am I audible? Good morning.
Yes, sir, you're audible, sir.
Yeah, fine. So it was really a nice, fine and interesting interaction, ma'am. The rendering was so nice, and yeah, this novel seems to be political, but as the way you read, we found that it does not lose the touch of humor and the appeal of high humanism. So please put some insight into the strategy of your writing scheme to find this, or to frame this in this way, ma'am.
Yes. Thank you. That's an interesting question. Which is why, the word political has been so abused that it's almost become a gali. But the point is, we know, we who are in the reading and writing world, we know that what does political mean? It's simply an awareness of power structures. That's all it is. So we lead political lives at home with, say, children and parents, with husbands and wives, the person who cooks for you and yourself, So as writers, as novelists, we see power and political use of power in a very human day-to-day way, not necessarily in terms of political parties and government formation. We see it as the living out of power structures, because that's what we experience in real life. And what I try to do in this novel is I use poetry because this is, as we know, we saw this powerfully last year. I didn't know when I was writing my novel that there was going to be proof presented to me that during the anti-CA protests, we saw that what were the so-called slogans that were the most powerful? Hum kagaz nahi dikhayenge. You know, these were young people teaching us that culture is, or music or poetry is something that belongs to people's daily lives. That so we were actually learning from them, saying, oh my God, they're reaching, because why do you write a novel? Why do you write a story or a poem? So that it's a conversation with somebody else. And these people were teaching us once more, as people have taught us throughout history, that there are different ways, imaginative ways in which you can have a conversation so that people understand what you're saying, but people understand it by crying when they read your novel, or laughing out loud, you know, or saying, yes, yes, that's true. This happened with my grandmother. This is completely true. You see, so these are the sort of things you try to achieve with your fiction. As far as I'm concerned, since we are in the strange situation of writing in a language that was brought to us by the colonials, a lot of what I was writing, for the first time, I've written so many books, but this time I felt the strangeness of writing this particular novel in English. But, you know, finally, a writer has to say, I can't have an ideal situation. Let me have this conversation, even though I have to do it on this idiotic Google Meet and not face to face. So we lead our lives with compromise, and compromise means humor. You know, because we just cannot have the ideal situation in terms of conversation, in terms of language. You know, we who live in India, we have so much trouble understanding each other's English even, right? Depending on which part of India you're from. So these are some of the things yes, and you're right. I think humor is terribly important, because despair is not going to allow us, forget reading and writing, despair is not going to allow us to see through this terrible situation in the world from today to tomorrow. So humor, laughter, and I think even against those who are hate mongers, who are dividers, who have an agenda against certain communities and castes, I think ridiculing them is very important. I think laughing at people who are foolish is very important. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. We have R. Jobrit Rodrigo with his question. Please, sir, if you can unmute and ask. R. Jobrit Rodrigo. I'm reading his question, ma'am. What is the impact of literature in present day society? Is writing freedom still exists?
Thank you. And I think, Saket, this is a good idea. I think if you take 2 or 3 questions, we'll save time, because
Yes,
I do have to run away at noon.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah,
Okay,
so, and we can do this again. You know, I'm not going anywhere.
Ma'am, my question.
Yeah.
My question.
Yes. Shall we combine, Saket? Shall we combine that question and yours?
Yes. Please, Dhanupam Soni.
Yeah, ma'am. A very good morning, ma'am. It was a mesmerizing speech I ever heard from you. And when we talk of racism, we talk of colonization and colonized agony. But in terms of India, we never state this kind of epistemological scars that we are carrying still on our back in 21st century. So, ma'am, what is your take on this thing?
Okay, let me combine the two questions in a very simple way. At least the students whom I can't see here will be happy to know that I'm not an academic. So I always answer questions in a very simple way. I'm merely a writer. So does the writer have freedom? Let me put it this way. There was a wonderful South African writer called Andre Brink who said that in times of siege, writers are more important, not less important. I think I should be honest and say that we are living in times where writers, filmmakers, musicians, journalists, everybody, even people who post things on Facebook, for God's sake, or tweet. So it's not just writers. I think across the board, there is a certain fear because I think to not admit to fear is foolish. I think true bravery is admitting to your fear and still saying, well, I will do it, though I'm terrified. So I think there is definitely a crushing of dissent, which is one of the main reasons I wrote this novel. And one of the main reasons that I'm part of something called the Indian Writers Forum, along with a whole lot of cultural practitioners and activists and academics. We have two sites, one called the Indian Cultural Forum and one called Guftagu, which is an online culture magazine. To come to Dranupam's question, we all carry numerous scars, individually and collectively. But we also carry a multiplicity of resources. I think it would be much more useful to talk in terms of constituencies, because let's put it out there clearly. Let's not talk about racism, because while we are looking at racism in the United States right now on a day-to-day basis, we need to look at the communalism here, the casteism here, the classism here. Nobody cares about the workers, the migrant workers, and so on. So let's talk about the scars in the making right now.
Yeah, that is
that's what is important, because what are the scars that our children are acquiring right now? If the middle class is communicating without saying it, if they're communicating this idea to their children that don't go out, don't talk to the person who is to cook for us, because they're, they might have germs and they might be spreading COVID, which is complete nonsense. They're the victims. They didn't bring COVID. It was all the guys who were traveling all over the place and doing international travel. So what I'm saying is that's why it's called prejudice. Prejudice and stereotypes are being, not only are they being reinforced, we're seeing them in new forms. So those are the scars. The old scars are scars. We don't care about them. It's like the scars, old scars on our face. Do we care so much about cosmetic surgery? No. We've got used to them. It's the new wounds, or the old wounds like caste, that are being, putting salt, rubbing salt on an old wound and opening it up. That is, I think, what we're talking about, So in a situation of crisis, when we are talking about livelihood on the one hand, hunger and starvation linked with that, and we are talking about health. Health is a public good. Everybody is entitled to that. So I think what we need to fight against, speak up against, even though we are occasionally frightened of the repercussions, is that we do not want any new wounds. We do not want any future scars.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Can we take one more question, ma'am, here?
Certainly. Let's take two more. I think Neha wants to ask a question.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Neha, ma'am.
Yeah. two things I wanted to speak about. Like you were talking about old wound, that it seems that casteism has become a very, very grave wound, because in Bhavani Bhattacharya's He Who Rides a Tiger, we see the same thing, that Kalu is experiencing this casteism, and then he pretends that he is a Brahmin in the city scenario. Same we feel that in R.K. Narayan's Guide, there is a like escape, and when he tries to convert or poses himself like a sadhu. Here I find a different kind of story, that Kannadev is an established poet, and now we are getting the story of his background, and people are coming to know that what actually he was by birth, or caste-wise, as we say usually. So when this wound is going to evaporate or eradicate from our society, because it's a continuous exercise. Bhavani Bhattacharya has written in 1955, you are writing in 2019, and the story is still the same, maybe in another form. This is one point I would wanted to emphasize on. And the second thing which I'm taking a clue from the end, which you have spoken about or just read right now, that Asha has hope, definitely. And she is looking that there is a kind of momentum, there is a kind of revolution which is coming on. So do you in your real life see this? So can we hope for this positivity?
Well, let me start with that. Both in what I write as well as in real life, our hope is in the youth. We've had our chance. We've tried. I'm not going to be entirely and falsely modest. We've tried in different ways. But several things here. One is that it is a young who we have to support them, we have to learn from them, we have to teach them what we can, but let them also teach us, as we have seen in very recent times. So I think that Asha is in the youth, which is why it's so important for the youth to come together in solidarity across caste and class lines, across community lines. And they have shown us in many ways in the recent anti-CA protests that it can be done. So that is one. The other thing is, when we're talking about caste, I hasten to say, and I've said this in my acknowledgements, that of course, this is very important to say, because finally the caste movements have to be led by people who know what it is, who have experienced caste discrimination in their day-to-day lives. But it is also important for those of us who've grown up with privilege, whether we might have pushed casteist ideas out of our head, but that doesn't mean we didn't grow up with privilege or we don't continue with privileged positions. But here I always take heart from what a very dear friend of mine, Bezwada Wilson of the Safai Karamchari Andolan, said once to a group of us. He said that, many middle-class people will say, and it's true also, they're not lying, that we grew up in a family where nobody talked about caste, we were not caste conscious, and so on. So Bezwada Wilson said, that's all we want. We want an India where even we never think of our caste. You see, we have reached a certain, we are fortunate enough never to have to think about caste. You see? So this is, and that's what I meant about power structures. But even those of us who are upper caste and middle class, but if you're a woman, for example, you know what it is to some extent to be at the receiving end. So there are all these power structures, and the point is that we cannot tell the caste movements what we can do, but we can express solidarity. We can say, we can spread the news among people like us who read and write and listen to these lectures that, hey, look, it continues. It continues in our institution, discrimination. So I think that is what, there is no citizen is exempt from the knowledge of caste, from the knowledge of communalism anymore. Our times, our communications have made it very clear that no citizen, no child even, is exempt from this knowledge at some level. So therefore, not one of us is exempt from doing something about it and coming together in solidarity, making alliances, so that we don't have different movements working at cross purposes. But we come together, whether it's the women's movement, whether it's the anti-communal movements, whether it's caste movements, whether it's workers' movements, that we come together. One last question.
Okay, ma'am. So we should take one question from one of our student, ma'am.
Yes, please. This is very bad. You're making me feel very guilty. We've not had any student questions so far.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Now it's there, ma'am. He's asking, ma'am, Ayush is asking, how can someone who is writing for children can write about topics like, say, evils of caste system in a way that is relevant to that age group?
I don't even know if I can call myself a children's, what does it mean to say you're a writer for children, writer for adults? A lot of adults I know are very childish, and a lot of children I know are quite adult. But I think the important thing is to be yourself and not act as if you know everything about everything, not talk down to people. I think you become a writer really because you don't know much, but you are smart enough to ask questions. I think the real challenge of writing, and as you know, now I've been writing for almost 40 years. What I have learned is be brutally honest with yourself and say, I'm going to ask these questions, so that the reader also says, okay, I don't think she knows the answers, but this is a question we're asking ourselves. Just as Neha asked, how do this damn thing dividing us has been around for so long, how do we change it? So that is a question we're asking together. And I think if we talk to students like that, not act as if you know everything and they don't, and you're just going to, cunningly find out what they don't know, which is how our exam system is. The exam is not to find out what they don't know. It is to find out what they know. So similarly, if you're writing for children. So I think if you just assume that, okay, they've just seen a little less than you have, that's all. But, they're young, they're not stupid. Just like a lot of people, when they see old people like me, they come and talk very loudly and explain it slowly. And you have to point out, I'm only old, I'm not stupid. So the same thing works for children, One more question from a student. I'm feeling very bad about this.
Okay, ma'am. I have one question from Shubhangini Priyadarshi.
Okay.
What changes can we expect in the post-COVID writing style? Will we see a change in the writing style as writers should, by turning their pens more towards nature?
My goodness, other than having a lovely name, this young woman's asked a very interesting question. I think, let me unravel this question. I think it's a very rich one. One is about the nature bit. I've become the tide is full of, in any case, in fact, my children get very embarrassed because I love the sky and I love trees and, I tend to, but I've noticed during the lockdown, a lot of artists, Ranbir Kaleka being one of them, a very fine artist, because we have been stuck at home and suddenly in the balconies, the kind of birds we're seeing that we've not seen in cities before, birds walking up and down the road, which is lovely. And I find myself sitting here and there's a window right here, so the miners and the babblers are having a fight. And I find myself actually talking to them, saying, stop fighting, don't be mean to, which sounds crazy. But the point is, there's suddenly a new relationship, a very intimate relationship with nature, because even those of us who live in a hellhole like Delhi are seeing, birds, and I was very excited to see the crow because I grew up in Bombay with lots of crows. So, but the crows have come back and they're fighting a war with the pigeons here. So, yes, I think actually artists and writers have suddenly, sort of gone back to nature. So I think that's a very interesting question to ask. We've also seen what it's like when we don't have all those cars out there, when we don't have all that pollution out there, how lovely it is to see the birds and so on flourish. So that is one aspect of it. I think the more challenging question here is, what are we all going to do? Writers, COVID, post-COVID, we are used to sitting in a room and writing. So our day-to-day lives haven't changed that much because we lead very isolated lives, which is why it's so exciting for us to meet people like you and talk to you about our work. But what is going to happen to us mentally? Are we going to feel more isolated? Are we going to feel more depressed? Are we going to feel more fear? Because the less you see people, the less conversation you have with people, the more you start imagining things, both about them and about yourself, feeling both fear of other people, of strangers, fear of strangers, and depression about yourself. And I worry that especially young people will start believing everything on social media, which is a kind of a strange, it's like a balcony where you come out wearing your best clothes and all your bangles and show off. And they're going to start thinking that everybody is doing all kinds of things and I'm not, and feel bad about themselves. So I think this is a time where we have to continue to talk to each other in whatever ways we can, wearing masks and meeting in person, meeting through these online technologies, but never forgetting that a lot of people have been left out of the conversation. Those who cannot have, who do not have laptops, who do not have Zoom or Google Meet, and finding different ways to go and talk to them. So nature, but other people. Other people come first, then nature comes second. Thank you so much.
Ma'am, we have a lot of questions. Do we have the permission for one last question, ma'am?
Sure.
Okay, we have Dr. MD Moiz Ashraf sir, PG, Head Department of Mathematics. He is asking, do you think that more and more youth are going in reverse direction? That is, they are now justifying casteism and religious fundamentalism.
My faith in the youth is very strong. I am not talking about those frustrated, confused people who have been brainwashed, into becoming gundas. Okay, I'm not talking about them, but there's always hope. I mean, you don't have to. In life, there are people who have seen close up what hate mongering does, what trolling does, and you've had people who say, "I can't bear this," and who've come. I don't know if you recall. After in 2016, when there was all that crushing of students in JNU, there was even an ABVP student who said, "I also oppose this. You cannot bring the police into the campus." So, we human beings are capable of change. That is the most important thing to remember. So we can't sort of condemn people forever. There are some people who it's terribly tempting to condemn forever, unfortunately, because they're such super hate mongers. But, so what do you do? If you think of other people as termites, for example, it's very hard to think that that person can change. But what I'm saying is that I think the youth, let me say that we have no other recourse. There are only hope. So every student who's listening to me, please ask questions, please speak up and express solidarity with different kinds of students and people. I don't believe for a moment that change will come from anywhere but from young people. And that is how it has always been throughout history, and our time is no different. I don't think that people are going back to being extremely casteist. I think more people are talking about it, and which is why there is hope that talking about it, shaming people who are either communal or casteist or sexist, will, or scorn people with other sexual orientations. I'm hoping that that will actually make people a little more rational. Because that's what it is. It's not men versus women, Hindus versus Muslims. It is rational people versus obscurantists.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was so good to hear you, ma'am. Thank you for such a wonderful session, ma'am. I call upon Neha, ma'am, to please go me with the vote of thanks, ma'am.
Yeah, it has been a privilege, ma'am, to listen to you, and we are very thankful that you accepted our invitation. And I thank you on behalf of Department of English, Karim City College, that you spend this 1.5 hours with us. And I'm sure the young students, young writer, and as you have spoken, that reading, writing citizens have been inspired by you, got motivated, and definitely we wish that one day will come when we, this entire India, not only India, but the entire world will be Anand Gram, as you have imagined in your recent title. And why this I should be there, hopefully it will become we, and we all will become tide and bring tsunami, and everything will be sorted out, and there will be nothing to feel panic or fearful about. So that's the hope, and with this hope I express my thanks to all the participants who have participated, questioned, and listened so patiently. Thank you so much.
I thank each and every one of you. And my website is there. Please, all those who wanted to ask questions, feel free to write and ask questions. As I said, really the question mark is my philosophy of life. So you're most welcome to ask questions. Thank you so much again.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Ibrahim and Sakit. Neha.
Thank you. Bye-bye, ma'am.
Bye-bye.
And we thank all our participants, especially the teachers who joined with us today, the research scholars, and our dear students, not from our college only, but from other colleges also. They are all dear to us. So we are extremely thankful to them, and thankful to Neha ma'am for such a beautiful word of thanks. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. So we all can sign off now.
Yeah, the feedback form will be valid for next
For
1
1
hour.
hour. Yes.
Yeah. So those who are interested in e-certificates, please apply through that. You'll receive the certificate immediately.
The link is there in the chat box.
जया भाई बहुत ही शानदार प्रोग्राम, बहुत अच्छी स्पीकर,
बहुत अच्छा सर।
जबरदस्त।
हाँ, बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया सर आप लोगों का अंत तक बने रहने के लिए।
बहुत स्पीकर थे, बहुत अच्छी स्पीकर थी और बहुत अच्छी बात, अपनी बातों को बहुत अच्छी तरह से उन्होंने रखा। बहुत अच्छा लगा।
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल।
अंग्रेजी, पूरा अंग्रेजी विभाग को मुबारकबाद
सर, बहुत अच्छा रहा, बहुत मजा आया।
थैंक यू सो मच शिबान भाई, मुइज भाई, बहुत शुक्रिया। इफ्तिखार सर का भी बहुत शुक्रिया, थे वो कंटिन्यूअस।
So we have Sina sir also.
हाँ, सेना सर थे, खुशवंत मैम थी, एंड नरेश सर भी। सब लोगों का बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया।
आफरीन मैम भी थी, उनका भी बहुत शुक्रिया अगर हैं तो।
हुमा मैम भी नहीं सर।
या हुमा, नाजिश वाज देयर।
Excuse
So,
me.
नाजिश मैम, यस।
Hello.
या हाँ, हेलो मैम।
Good afternoon, sir. Sir, actually, I got logged off towards the end, so I
हाँ,
missed that form, link of the form.